You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Thank you so much for joining me today on our Total Wellness Tuesday show. We're going to be going over what to ask for and why when running your annual blood work review. So this is a big confusing point for a lot of people that I see in my practice, and I just know questions in general that come in. They don't know what to ask their PCP for or even run themselves when looking at blood work, because a lot of the blood work I see that comes in is just missing critical numbers. Like, a lot of people are just missing, they just have big holes in looking at their overall health because they're not running the right numbers. And it's just, your health insurance should be able to cover most of these things. And for the most part, you really have to check to see if even vitamin D is covered anymore, any of these things. I've just decided to run it on my own because the truth is that a lot of times the copay is as much as just running it on your own, but I'll let that be your decision. If you have a really good PCP that's able to sign off on all of these things, then more power to you. That's great. I mean, that's what your health insurance should be used for, is being able to check on your blood work at least once per year. So what I want to do is this, I'm not going to go over today why to run your blood work. I'm going to do that actually next Tuesday. I'm going to compare that to other labs. But what I want to do today is just reinforce the idea that you do have to, meaning, like, a lot of people say, oh, well, blood work is just looking at what's available to the body. And I don't disagree with that, meaning that, you should be looking at other labs as well, but blood work is important. It honestly is, because it does show if you're really out of range. So here's an example. In functional medicine, we don't just look at if you're out of range or not. We look to see if you're optimal. And here's the example of that. With vitamin D, on a typical lab test, it should be between 30 and 100 nanograms per milliliter. Okay, so if we look at that, if you're a 31 on that lab test, you're okay. You're within range. You're great. Your doctor doesn't say anything. The problem is that's not optimal, and you're going to have some functional deficiency of vitamin D, meaning, like, your immune system is not going to be as great as it could be. Your ability to lose weight, your ability to fight off cancer cells, your ability to deal with allergies or autoimmune is not going to be as good as it could be, but yet you're within range, right? So what's functional medicine? Well, functional medicine says that, according to research, the optimal range to be in for vitamin D is not just 30 to 100, it's actually between 50 and 70. And for cases like certain types of cancer, it might be better to actually be closer to 100 for a short period of time, okay? So what we're looking at is the optimal zone now for your average person being between 50 and 70, rather than the huge zone of being between 30 and 100. Now, what does it mean if you're below, let's say you're a 19 on vitamin D, or you're 120? Well, it means you fall within that small fraction or parameter of people who are going to suffer then from too elevated of immune response, potentially hypercalcemia, pulling too much calcium into the bloodstream as well, which, again, you'll see on a lab test, or too low, where your immune system now is deficient. So, again, we don't want to wait for that. We actually want to make sure you're within the healthy zone. And that goes for most things, okay? That goes for most parameters. And so what I want to do is I want to discuss that today. What to look at, what to ask for, and then I'm actually just going to give you a link, right? I'm going to give you a simple link to a company that you can do a printout for. Like, I'll literally give you the PDF. I'll make it that easy for you. Just go to stephencabral.com/767, okay? I'm going to put the links in there. I'm actually going to make a note of that right now. So links for PDFs and to order kit yourself if you choose to, all right? Nothing to do with my company. You can order them anywhere that you want in the world. It doesn't matter to me, as long as they run these parameters, all right? So, because I know that if you're in, let's say, Australia, or you're in the Middle East or wherever, like, because we have listeners, again, like all over the world, you're going to want to find a place that you can buy the kit yourself or, again, have your PCP sign off on it. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that you want to ask your PCP to run is your glucose, okay? Let's step back 1 second. There's actually a best time of the day to run your blood work, and it's between 8 and 10 in the morning, and you should be fasted from at least midnight the night before, ideally probably after dinner, all right? But you want to be fasted for 12 hours, all right? If you're going in at 8 a.m., then try to fast from 8 p.m. the night before. This is going to give you your best indicators literally for cholesterol, lipids, glucose, etc. All right? So we're going to test your blood between 8 and 10 in the morning. Do not test your blood after a meal. Your markers are going to be different unless you're looking for that, unless that's your goal. All right, so we're looking at glucose. What's glucose? I'm just going to give you an overview. And then in the future, I'm going to actually teach other practitioners how to read blood work from a functional medicine perspective. I will do that in the future. We're going to be creating advanced certifications, but I'll teach on the podcast, of course. But for right now, the reason you run glucose is to want to see if you have any issues, which would be leaning towards type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, weight gain, cortisol-based issues. Because again, when you're in hyper-adrenal-based state, you're going to have high blood pressure. And when you're in hypo-adrenal-based state, you'll have lower blood sugar. So things to look into. So you'll want to run your glucose. All right. Next up, you're going to want to run your hemoglobin A1C. Now, this is a great snapshot looking at essentially blood sugar over the last 90 to 120 days. Certainly, it's weighted over the last 60 to 90 days. And it allows you to see if you have high hemoglobin A1C. And again, I don't want to get too deep into this, is that you might have some type of insulin resistance where you're not able to shuttle the sugar into your cells, potentially because of some type of cell receptor-based issue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to look at hemoglobin A1C, and I might even add insulin to that blood work as well. All right, next up, we're going to want to look at a lipid panel overall. Let's talk about triglycerides first, all right? You're going to want to run triglycerides. And again, you want to look at this from a functional medicine perspective. A lot of people say you can have triglycerides up to 150. I would disagree. I would say there should be between 50 and 100, certainly not above, not in my opinion, not above 100. Okay, so what are we looking at with triglycerides? Well, we're essentially looking at fructose metabolism. We're looking at liver function. We're looking at atherosclerosis, inflammation, adrenal-based issues, thyroid-based issues, biliary function, gallbladder. All right, so run your triglycerides. Also run your total cholesterol, okay? Total cholesterol does matter. There's a lot of people who just throw cholesterol out. Like, oh, cholesterol doesn't matter. No, it does. It really does. It matters in the big picture of things, okay? So you want to look at total cholesterol and really marker-wise, it should be between 160 and 200. You can get away with higher cholesterol if your numbers do work, but for the most part, most people are best suited between 160 and 200 for their cholesterol. Cholesterol can be, again, many, many different things. Throw genetics out the window. Unless your cholesterol is literally 700, and again, I've seen ridiculous cholesterol, but it was after someone ate eggs and bacon for breakfast, okay? But someone who has true genetic hypercholesterolemia, so rare, they're 10 years old and they have cholesterol of a 700. That's a different story, different picture. Very, very rare. If you have cholesterol of a 300, we can work with that. Again, don't blame it on genetics. Sure, your grandfather, your grandmother, everyone in your family might have had high cholesterol, but that's because there were things they were doing with their lifestyle, with their diet, with their thyroid, with their blood sugar, with inflammatory-based issues, with adrenal-based issues, with heavy metals, with oxidative stress. You can correct these things. And if you correct all the things that I just mentioned, well, then your cholesterol doesn't need to be as high. Because remember, endogenously, your cholesterol's for the most part produced by your liver, not necessarily even a food. But it does matter. Again, it matters for those people with a certain ApoE-B gene type. All right? Next up you want to run is your LDL cholesterol. And you want to run that because you want to look at its so-called bad cholesterol, but that's oxidative-based cholesterol. You want to run your HDL, which is your so-called good cholesterol, because you want to make sure that you're able to produce enough of this antioxidant-based cholesterol to balance your LDL cholesterol, okay? You want to run up next is you'll pretty much always get this, your cholesterol ratio, but you want to see what your total cholesterol over your HDL is as well, and that number should be below a 3.5, ideally really below a 3. That's great in terms of future heart disease or cardiovascular-based risk. Okay, next up, you want to look at those kidneys. You want to look at your BUN, your BUN. You want to look at your creatinine. You want to look at your BUN-creatinine ratio. You want to look at uric acid, which is looked at in terms of gout, oxidative stress, kidney issues, protein-based issues, and then, of course, there's other things as well, like a lack of B12, a lack of natural folate, a lack of molybdenum, and then a lack of copper as well. But we'll get into that in the future. You want to check out your potassium. You want to check out your sodium. You want to check out your calcium. You want to check out your chloride. You want to check out those minerals. All right, really, really important. It looks essentially at tissue destruction. It looks at alkalosis, acidosis, adrenal-based issues, digestion. You want to run your CO2. Okay, you want to look at, again, metabolic alkalosis, metabolic acidosis. You want to look at respiratory acidosis, respiratory alkalosis. These things get more in depth in biochemistry, but really important to look at as well. You want to look at anion gap, okay? Metabolic acidosis, thiamine, which is B1. We've talked about that before, the importance of B vitamins. You want to look at your total protein, okay? How are you doing digestion-wise, or are you dehydrated, okay? You want to look at your albumin, same thing essentially. You want to look at dehydration, digestion, oxidative needs. You want to look at your globulin, really important as well in terms of immune, oxidative, heavy metal overload. This is essentially how I look at mystery-based cases as well. Really important to look at these things. All right, phosphorus, another one of those minerals. Magnesium as well. Alkaline phosphatase. Love having people run this. Hardly anybody runs it anymore. If it's low, it's just, even if it's below a 60, I would say simple, easy way to find out if you're zinc deficient. Like super easy. Okay, and then we can look at high as well. LDH. Nobody runs this anymore. I don't understand why. You need to run this. Really, really important. If you have a higher LDH, anything over really 180, you're looking at tissue destruction, viral infection, lack of B vitamins, really inflammation-based causes. Check that out. Run that number as well. All right. Then you want to run your liver enzyme counts. Usually, your liver enzymes. Usually, they're described as AST and ALT, also called SGOT or SGPT. Okay, I'm going to give you all of these. Don't worry about memorizing them. GGTP as well, looking at liver function. All right. A lot of these have to do with B12, B6 deficiency, magnesium deficiency. Alcoholism, of course, will affect these things. So will fatty liver from too much fructose, triglycerides. Again, so you're making the connections. I talked about yesterday on my Mindset Motivation Monday. What am I looking for? I'm looking for patterns, pattern recognition. All of these things start to overlap. They're not individual things if you know what to look for. Bilirubin, we're looking for that as well. Direct bilirubin, we're looking for indirect bilirubin. Those tell us about the biliary gallbladder-based issues as well. All right. Next up, I'm running iron. I'm running ferritin. I'm running total iron binding capacity. For that, I'm looking at transferrin saturation. Then I'm moving on to thyroid. I'm looking at TSH. I'm looking at total. I'm looking at free T3. I'm looking at total free T4. I'm looking at sometimes reverse T3 as well. Okay, I'm looking at ESR for inflammation. Again, general, it's non-specific. In the same vein, I'll also look at homocysteine for inflammation of the arteries. And I will run CRP as well, which is known as C-reactive protein. So important because if you have high cholesterol, you have high homocysteine, you have high CRP, that is a recipe for cardiovascular-based issues. If you have high homocysteine, high CRP, high cholesterol, right away, lower all of those right away, like literally right away, okay? Because that's closing up, that's inflammation of the arteries. We need to take care of that. All right. Next up, I'm looking at my complete blood count, my CBC. I'm looking at total white blood cells, looking at high or low, dealing with potential virus overload, cancer, immune stress, immune weakness, all of those things, okay? I'm looking at red blood cells. I'm looking at hemoglobin, hematocrit. I'm looking at MCV, MCH, MCHC, RDW, all of those things. What do they really tell me? Well, they're telling me how much oxygen do you have in those red blood cells? Really important because this shows me all of the different vitamin C, B6, B12, iron. I'm looking at potentially magnesium, all these different deficiencies that lead to a lack of oxygen in the body. So people have to understand this, that this is taught in functional medicine, is taught in naturopathic medicine to the newer class of naturopathic doctors, all right? It wasn't taught to me back in the day, but definitely the newer naturopathic doctors. Okay, so here's the deal. All of these things can be figured out. Everything can be figured out if you just have the education behind it. A lot of doctors are dismissive of running these things or even interpreting for you just because they didn't continue education. That's it. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It exists. For real, it exists. And that's why it's very, very important to make sure you run these things. Okay. Next up, we're running really immune-based cells. We're running neutrophils, monocytes, lymphocytes, eosinophils, basophils, platelets. Okay, why are we running these things? Well, we're running them to look at your immune function in general. If you have high eosinophils, typically we're looking at environmental allergies or food-based allergies. All right, anything above a 2, really. Basophils, honestly, anything, a 1 or above, we're looking at tissue inflammation, but we're also looking at potentially parasites. So I love running that for sure. Lymphocytes, we're looking at how the lymphatic system is doing, white blood cells in general. We're looking at acute-based issues as well, systemic toxicity, because that's what your immune systems or your lymphatic system is supposed to remove. bacterial infections, viral infections, all these things really, really important to look at. So, I mean, those things to me are the main things. What I want to do is actually direct you now to a couple other things that you can run that may be nice to run, but better run with saliva. Okay, it's great to run your testosterone, great to run your DHEA, estrogen, and progesterone, okay? And a lot of times you can get your cortisol run as well. Are they as great as running in your saliva? No, they're not. They're not, because a lot of times they're bound, okay? So I prefer to run things in their own specific best mechanism. So for, again, blood work, I just named it. You're not going to run the things that I just named besides the hormones. You're not going to run those through saliva. You're not going to run them through hair. You're not going to run them through urine. You're going to run them through blood, okay? So everything is best suited in its own compartment. I talked about that before on the Big 5 lab review. And why don't I link that up today? If you didn't listen to my Big 5, like what 5 lab tests you should run, check that out. That's really, really important. And I'm going to link that up in today's show notes as well. Go to stephencabral.com/767. I will link up to the PDFs to hand to your PCP. I will link up to the link if you want to order the kit on your own. And I will link up to the Big 5 to figure out kind of like what best labs to run. All right. One other thing that's extremely important to run that I did not mention is vitamin D. You have to run your vitamin D. It's best done through blood work. All right. We run it on our thyroid adrenal hormone test, but that also has the blood drop card in there as well. Run your 25-hydroxy vitamin D. If you only run one part of the vitamin D, run that. I talked about in the beginning of the show, it should not be between 30 and 100. Yes, it should be, of course, but it should be between 50 and 70 for optimal. All right. That is how to do it. That is what you're looking for. What I link up today is actually going to be a male panel and a female panel from Life Extension. That's the company right now in the US that you can order the kit on your own if you choose to. I don't think that I'm affiliated in any way with Life Extension, except that they make the process really easy. They send the kit to you, and then you get to simply complete it on your own. That's really it. The difference with a male versus female panel is on the female, they're going to run progesterone, estrogen. On the male, they're going to run your testosterone. Actually, they run that on the female as well, which is great. So here's the deal. Those Life Extension reports have everything that I recommend, but at the same time, I'm going to give you the PDF that you can literally hand it to your doctor. So hopefully that makes sense today. That is exactly what to ask for, and it's why to ask for it. So hopefully that helps as well. And once you have all of those numbers, then you have real information that you can look at specific patterns. But here's the bigger thing. Everyone should run their blood work on a yearly basis, and here's why. You need to look back every single year at what your blood work was the year before. And I'll tell you why. You need to be able to see what your baseline is. Meaning like everyone falls a little bit differently within their baseline. Like for some people, good TSH for them is 1.5. For others, they feel best at 0.75, all right, for their thyroid. So when you don't feel your best, you might start to feel a little sluggish and you're at a 2, even though 2 is okay for your TSH. You're like, when I look back in the past, I really feel best when I was 0.75 or 1 for a TSH. So now that I'm at 2, even though I'm within the functional zone, I actually don't feel my best. This is why you need to start creating a health folder on yourself. You don't need to micromanage, but you need to macromanage. And you need to look at those things over the course of a year, 2 years, 3 years in your lifetime. Because if you have a lifetime of data, it's going to be very easy for a functional medicine doctor to be like, oh, I see what's going on. Each year, you start to accumulate a little bit more cholesterol. Each year, your triglycerides go up, or each year, your CRP starts to creep up. What's going on here? What's going on? We need to figure this out, and we need to start to work in reverse. We need to reverse these issues because believe me, they're all reversible. They are. They are all reversible. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Don't let anybody tell you it's genetic. Sure, it's genetic. We all have our own genetic code. We've got 20,000 genetic pieces in there that we need to look at. But it only matters as life starts to creep up on us. That's it. That's why at 40, things might start to go wrong. Or for others, it's not until 50 or 60. Well, the genetics were always there. The genes were always there. What happened was eventually stress or poor eating or alcohol or lack of sleep or whatever started to creep up on you. And then the genetics started to show themselves. But just the same way, you can reverse those things in the lifestyle, reverse those things with nutrition, all of the things. And then the genetics, they get switched off. That's how it works. This is called epigenetics. It's been proven. You turn them on, you turn them off. Turn them on, turn them off. And you can really do that. You really can. So that's it. Hopefully that helped today. As always, like I said, this is really important stuff. It is because PCPs are not running all of these things and they need to be. Please ask your doctor. It's your health. It's your body. You deserve to be able to take control of your health, either run the lab kit on your own. I'll give you the link. It's not through us. It's through Life Extension. Or I'll give you the PDF to show to your PCP and say, hey, I would like to run all of these things. Can you do that for me? And again, it's your body. It's your health. You should be allowed to do those things. Hopefully today's show helped. Feel free to pass along, share with anybody you believe it could serve. And thank you so much for tuning in to another Cabral Concept. Before you go, I wanted to share a personal story with you. The real reason I began to get well finally is because I figured out what was wrong with me. And that might seem pretty obvious, but I went from doctor to doctor for over 2 years before discovering at-home functional medicine lab testing. These are the labs that enabled me to finally figure out what was wrong with my hormones, blood sugar, electrolytes, and gut health. And once I knew what was wrong, I could then follow a proven plan in order to rebalance my body from the inside out. This is why I believe so strongly in functional medicine lab testing and why I've made it my mission to share these labs with the world. Now at equa.life, you can order an at-home lab test or lab bundle for you and your family and be able to complete it within the week. Plus, the EquaLife difference is that you're not left to try to read and figure out these labs on your own. We explain what your lab numbers mean, what they mean in the much bigger picture, and then how to go about rebalancing your body in order to heal. To see our full selection of lab tests or to set up a free lab selection call to find out what labs may be best for you, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. And do remember, we ship these all over the world. To find out more and to set up your free lab selection call, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. That's EQUI.LIFE/labs.